Welcome back, everyone, to the final episode of the fall semester of Jacket Sports Weekly. Today, we're going to cover men's and women's wrestling, indoor track and field, and men's and women's basketball. So don't change that video. You're watching Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome to JSW, WCTV's home for Waynesburg sports. Watch our analysts discuss fall, winter, and spring sports and cover topics such as Athletes of the Week, phenomenal plays, and intense games on a weekly basis. Tune in every Tuesday to hear what's going on with your favorite sports at Waynesburg University here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Where else would you want to be on?
Where else would you rather be?
On today's first segment, we're going to be talking about men's and women's wrestling. Joined with me, Mo Kiger to my left. We're going to be talking about some wrestling. Mo, how are you feeling today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good. Wrestling just had an invitational out, the Ohio Northern Invitational. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the team, as in the past couple invitationals, really, in my perspective of things, have not done great, as they placed 10th out of 12 teams, which we don't know. We really don't know the competition that they had there. They had a total of 42.5 points, which was 1.5 points behind the 9th place team. But honestly, moving forward into invitationals, you need to really dig down deep so you can get more points up on the board, because I know looking back, Coach McKinney is not very happy with this. And I know that most wrestlers are not very happy with placing bottom 3. So once they address that and get everything situated, they'll be fine for the rest of their invitationals.
So we're talking about women's here or men's?
Men's, women's, whatever you want to
All
ask me.
right, so I just wanted to first off just shout out Jesse Orban. He went on the meet at the wrestling at 184 pounds. He finished 3-1 at the meet, even though he was edged in a 4-2 close decision during his final match. He was actually one of the 2 Waynesburg wrestlers that placed at their last invitation. He also notched a technical fall and 2 decisions to reach the finals, and he defeated regionally ranked Owen Frizzle 5-2 in the semifinal match to move on to the finals. Even though he wasn't ranked, I feel as if he showed this impressive display of just some fight for this team. You mentioned, Mo, that they finished bottom 3. That's the last place that you want to be as in a team as a whole. But when you break some things down and you look at the individual side of who succeeded, there's some things to be proud of there, and there's some things to build on for the team as a whole.
Yeah, and looking back at Jesse Orban, as we know, the last invitational that he did not wrestle in, and because of a medical injury or something like that, either a concussion, but he came back very strong, and that's what I really like to see, is that no matter with Jesse Orban, no matter what, he is going to wrestle his heart out because he absolutely loves the sport of wrestling. And he went on to be 3-1 on the day, losing in the finals match against a regionally ranked wrestling. So congratulations out to him. And then we're looking at Seth Evans again for him placing 6th. And that's his 3rd invitational that he's placed in a row. He went 3-3 on the day, which is outstanding. I know that it may not look outstanding going 500, but it's incredible, especially as a wrestler in the collegiate level. You have to have that grit and mindset that, hey, I am going to get on this podium, and Seth Evans has that mindset. And I'm going to congratulate him too, because he is one of the most outstanding wrestlers that Waynesburg has seen in the past couple years.
So moving on, I'm going to take it here, Will. Just talking about the women's side of things. Their last meet at University Heights, Ohio on November 24th, they had 3 women compete. It was Farron DeWitt at 110 pounds, Melanie Matherson at 145, and then Jakaya Matthews at 207. They pretty much got washed as a whole, those victories being John Carroll 30-9, Mount Union swept them 39-zip, Otterbein was 30-5, and then it was Buffalo State 35-5. You take a look at some individual things. Where do you see some improvement could be had? And I know this is like the first true year for the wrestling program of the Waynesburg Women's Wrestling Program. But how can this program succeed? And what are some bright spots and some dark moments?
I mean, as you said, it's the first real season for women's wrestling as a whole. We knew coming into this that, hey, we might not make it as far as men's, but they're still looking for their first win overall. But overall, they've been practicing as many times as the men has in the wrestling room, and they have looked pretty decent. Although I haven't watched them, but I know I've been hearing from the men's side that, hey, the women's are worth watching. And that with these duels coming up over the Christmas break, I have Farron DeWitt and Madison both coming out strong and picking up a pair of wins, maybe a couple more than a pair, to really put this Waynesburg women's wrestling team above and put a push forward into the future.
So moving back to men's wrestling, we saw a pair of heavyweight bouts between Caleb Snipe and Austin Fleming, two heavyweight fighters on the wrestling team. Why don't you talk about their matches in this previous invitational?
Yeah, so we're starting off with Caleb Snipe. He had a pair of wins by fall, and he sadly had a medical forfeit. He had to forfeit his last match in the 7th place bout, which cost him to get 8th place. But if he comes back for these duels, I am looking for him to have a really great day, and just moving along, him to just provide for this Waynesburg wrestling team at heavyweight. And then we come over and we look at Austin Fleming, who also picked up a pair of wins, and another win via medical forfeit from his opponent. And his two wins were also by falls, which I think that's saying something. If both your heavyweights are picking up wins by falls, that is amazing, because it is so hard to be able to pin a guy in a college wrestling dual meet or invitational, because they just have a different mindset. But congratulations to Austin Fleming and Caleb Snipe.
Well, that's going to be all we have for this wrestling segment of Jacket Sports Weekly. Morgan, I appreciate your time on here. Thank you for the breakdown and the analysis. But don't go anywhere, because coming up next, we have men and women's indoor track and field. Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. As I said, we're going to be talking about men and women's indoor track and field today. We're with our first-time guest, ran track and field in high school at Thomas Jefferson, Vinny Heller. Vinny, how are you doing today? How's the semester been?
I'm doing great. Semester's flying by. Ready for finals week and get out of here.
Well, let's get right into it. So, wanted to talk about some top 10 finishes across the last meet for Waynesburg. Quentin Weaver, Maggie Clare, Jacob Harker, and Garrett Hillard. Weaver finished 10th overall in the men's 3K. Maggie Clare finished 4th in shot put. Harker finished 6th in men's shot put. And Hillard finished 10th in weight throw.
Yes.
Break it down for us.
There's Quentin Weaver. He's coming back as a 6-year senior. I've gotten word that he may not be as good as he used to be, but he's still trekking, entering that 6th year. I mean, we'll see how long he could go. Maggie Clare, a freshman, to come out and finish 4th overall in the shot put with, I believe she threw a 10.90. It's also the 10th best in Waynesburg school history. It's a program top 10. I think that's pretty special, especially coming from a freshman. Bright future here for her. Jacob Harker, I've gotten word that he's trying a new throwing style, and clearly it's showing off. He finished 6th in the men's shot put with a 1380. He just missed a Waynesburg top 10 by .01 meters, and that would have been special. He also placed 15th in the weight throw with an 11.86 meter. Garrett Hillard placed 10th in the weight throw with a 12.57. I mean, that's always special. He's a senior here, looking for a lot of these seniors to step up and continue and help them have a successful season, along with the young guys and young women like Maggie Claire. And I feel like this could be a really strong season for us.
So all those people that you just mentioned, they had a great day at that meet. There's another person that also had a great day. Let's talk about Ella Rochelle. She's the PAC Athlete of the Week. Why don't you break down her day?
She was very consistent. I mean, she also set 2 personal records in the 400 and the long jump. She ran the 400 in 1 minute and 2 seconds and then jumped a 4.96 in the long jump. If she could stay consistent, I could see a lot of success coming from her. She's very consistent. She did 4 events. She was all over the place, and she was doing what she needed to do. And I feel like even though this icebreaker meet wasn't really a counted meet, the scores weren't really kept, I feel like in the upcoming meet at Muskingum, she could really help her team with a win if she stays consistent and keeps doing what she's doing.
All right, now just looking at the last question for you, Vinny. They don't return to action, the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets, that is, until January 25th at Muskingum. You're a football player. You have bye weeks, but they have a bye month and a half.
Yeah.
How do you stay loose? What do you have to do as an athlete to prepare yourself for these next moments and next meets over breaks?
As an athlete, everybody knows you have to stay, especially as a runner athlete, you have to stay conditioned, you have to stay hydrated, because you're still running and it's winter, but now that it's indoor, it's not cold in there, right? But what we didn't see at this last meet was a lot of the distance runners. Quentin Weaver was the only distance runner on the men and women's team, and that's because most of our distance runners are cross-country athletes. They're still recovering from their season, which is reasonable. They're running miles on end. They need that time to set in and set in stone where they'll be in the upcoming track season. However, there's a lot of young kids who need to step up, and I feel like this is the time to keep practicing and better themselves in order to come back strong and fire right off the blocks as soon as they go, coming off that month and a half break.
Well, what would be something just to give, like, maybe viewers a different perspective? Like I said, you have the bye week. What's something you do in the bye week to take care of your body?
You stretch a ton. There's weightlifting. Everybody can lift weights, but you don't want to obviously lift heavy weights. You have to do what's called maintain lifting. Maintain your strength and make sure your core is stable, and to understand that this is a really long break, and if you don't do everything right, you could shoot off the blocks in your first sprint and pull a muscle, tear a hamstring. It's still very dangerous if you do not take the right precautions and do what you need to do to help your body be in the best shape it is to be able to compete with other athletes who are doing the same thing. So,
well, Vinny, thank you so much for your time talking about indoor track and field. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Joseph Trillo talking about women's basketball.
Unable to watch the live stream? Follow our account on X for live updates on the game. Check us out on Instagram as well for game day posts with all the information you need to know, as well as behind the scenes of each production. Our social media team works the hardest to give the best content to all of our audience. We're even on TikTok. You can stay up to date with WCTV on our Instagram account with clips from each of our shows. And last but not least, subscribe to our WCTV YouTube channel to watch those shows in full length. Check us out from Lewiston, WCTV, and the entire Department of Comm.
Welcome back to our third segment here on Jacket Sports Weekly. We are joined by Joseph Trillo. Joseph, how are we feeling today?
We're feeling good. I mean, women's basketball, there's a lot to talk about, and although it's been going not in the way we'd like to see it, I think it's gonna go in the ways we want it. coming here shortly.
Yeah, we're going to start off. This team started off 4-0 to start the year, and then they enter into PAC play. They've lost 5 in a row. What's been going on?
I mean, the biggest thing is just that third quarter inconsistencies that we've been seeing earlier in that year with that first, when those non-conference matchups were going, when we were 4-0, the third quarter was looking pretty good. And that the biggest thing was that first quarter was what wasn't what we were looking for. But in this third quarter, as it's continuing to be a problem, is that it is being very consistent that within that third quarter, they're coming in, they're looking tired, they're looking not as loose. So maybe it's something that they got to come out of halftime a little bit earlier, come onto the court a little bit stronger, maybe work on some different kinds of warm-ups, anything like that could help them. But the biggest thing also within that third quarter is that at that point, I feel like maybe this isn't how it exactly is going, but like the game plan is kind of being thrown out, where we're coming into it and we're just putting different groups of girls together onto the court, and it's not really working as well. Maybe they're not practicing together, or it's just they don't have a lot of gameplay together. Their chemistry with it when they're on the court, it's not looking the same as what we would see in that first half of play. So I think the biggest thing is just what is it that we need to do? What is that question that they're going to need to ask themselves over this winter break is, are we going to continue to be sub-heavy where we're going to continue to see multiple different girls be getting a lot of different time within this game? Or are we going to be seeing a starting 5 be a cemented 5 throughout the entirety of the game?
Now, you already touched on the third quarter struggles, Joe. I just wanted to mention that 28 points is how many points Waynesburg has scored in the third quarter over the last 3 games. 11 points against Bethany, 9 in their last game against Allegheny prior to Chatham, and then 8 against Chatham in the third quarter. But talking about some specifics when breaking it down, it always seems as if it's the close game in the first half, and it always gives the hope of a fantastic second half, and then that third quarter is just stalemate. Who are some players that need to step up, and maybe schematically wise, what are things that need to change? You mentioned the different groups of girls, but how does that dynamic affect the level of play on the court as a whole?
Well, the dynamic really comes down to who is going to be on that court, as mentioned, is who do we want on there being together, playing together as much as they can. I think the biggest thing is that you do need to have those rebounders down in the paint with Jules Moorbacher and Maddie Dayton. Both of them need to be on the court at all times, or if it's not both of them, at least one of them.
Yeah,
and normally that's what we've been seeing.
2 games in a row with double-doubles, 15-11, then 15-12.
Exactly. So those rebounds is what's been helping this team, but definitely in that half, it hasn't been. Now, granted, when we enter into that second half, we haven't seen a lot of Moorbacher and Dayton together. Normally, that's later in the third and definitely within the fourth quarter. So maybe that's something that they explore. Going into that, what are we going to see a little bit more? But then I definitely think that in that third quarter, especially going into Westminster, who is an offensive, struggling team, which we'll get into a little bit more, is that maybe focus on the defense a little bit more. Maybe not focus on shooting those three-pointers as much as just getting the turnovers, getting them down into the paint, laying them up, and getting those easy buckets. The biggest thing also is that when talking to a few different of the basketball players on the team, it doesn't seem like they're really practicing with a lot of the starters as they go on. It seems like they're mainly just practicing all together and not in the same groups that we would normally see that are on the court. So although it is cool that we're seeing this team come out in the first half very well, we can see why it's struggling within the second half.
Here's another issue coming into the third quarter, turnovers. This was a problem we've seen in years past with this team. It didn't happen in the first 4 games when they went 4-0, But in these past 5 games, it's really turned up, especially in the game against Chatham. They turned the ball over 11 times in the third quarter. What's been going on there?
The biggest thing also is just that defense. When they're coming out, their muscles are a lot more tense on themselves. They're not really as loose when they come out. And then, of course, we're having those players that are coming out. They're shining on their own, but they're not shining as a team. So Macy Justice, being one of the freshmen, being able to come into this game a lot more recently, has been able to produce numbers personally, but not really team-wise as a group. So maybe that's one of those things is we're seeing her getting on the court more, is that do they need to start incorporating her in different practice methods, different drills during that practice time, maybe during their warm-ups, stuff like that. What are we going to see more consistently is mainly just what players are we going to be seeing all the time and which ones of those need to be doing certain things, because I feel like they're all having different roles and they're not understanding what those roles are during the actual games.
So just taking a look at the last game, 87-59 victory for Allegheny over Waynesburg University. That was a tie game at halftime. We already touched on that, but what is it about the top scorers of other teams from other schools that it seems like when they have that top player, they shine against Waynesburg? Like if it's known that this player is good, this player is going to come in and do well against Waynesburg.
And Waynesburg
this time it was Bella Antonassi with 34 points.
Waynesburg has been very good at being able to subsidize those different kinds of women that are being able to be known as those individuals. But with that, there are multiple teams like Bethany who was able to just continuously shoot around the arc with any of their players that they had, which kind of hinders what they've been trying to do in these past games. But with that also is that multiple times you have to rely on multiple different girls because there is so much substituting going on. Some are better at defense than the others, some are better than offense than the others. So I think another thing is also consistency, to see if we're going to stay with consistency or if we're going to be continuing to see the different kinds of methods that they're going about with substitutes and all that.
Kind of sticking on the same topic here, Westminster does have a top 20 scorer in Katie Morayo. She's 18th in scoring for the PAC, but Waynesburg has 2 top 10 scorers, that being Callista Friday at 8th and Kara McFadden at 10th. What's going to be the dynamic here with these 3 top 20 scorers coming into this game?
Well, with that, Kara and Callista are just continuing to show great numbers. They, in total points, are at the number 2 and number 3, but in their averages, they are in the lower slot. So it's kind of more of what kind of Kara and what kind of Callista are we going to be getting during these games. I think during Westminster, although Westminster's defense is very good, I think being able to see those players kind of shine a little bit more is going to be where we're going to get these tall tale stories. But in the defensive side of things, Dayton is always willing to get involved with any player that is on that court. So I think pairing her up with those top scorers for Westminster is going to be the best game plan to go into for Westminster.
Thanks, Joe. That's all we have for women's basketball, who started the season 4-0 in out-of-conference play, have lost their last 5 straight in conference play. But as I said, that was Joey Chirillo, myself, and Will Yocum for the segment of women's basketball. Now moving on to men's basketball when we come back with Benicio DeFalco.
You're listening to WCYJ FM, 99.5 The Hive, your home for everything Waynesburg.
Our campus radio station gives students like you a chance to work in live studio environment without ever leaving Waynesburg. WCYJ FM has specialty shows, sports recaps, and updates, weather, and live coverage of your Yellow Jackets. Tune in at 99.5 The Hive or online at waynesburg.edu/listen.
Welcome back for the final segment of Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm still your host, Dean Shazer, with co-host William Yocum, and this time, our men's basketball analyst, Benicio DeFalco. Benicio, just get right into it. Chatham defeated Waynesburg last Wednesday, 64-60, a game where Waynesburg just looked like they couldn't hit the final shot to put them away. Break it down for us.
Yeah, kind of exactly what you said there. Chatham going in this game was 7-1, which is first in the President's Athletic Conference. Waynesburg won the rebounding margin 40-37, which Waynesburg has done in majority of the games this season. But however, this time it was not part of the winning formula. PJ Suggs was the leading scorer for the Yellow Jackets once again with 17 points and 5 rebounds. And then Anton Baker had 16 points and 13 rebounds, another double-double to, it seems like almost every game this guy gets a double-double. Mm-hmm. But just recapping the game a little bit, Chatham went on 11-2 run in the second half actually, and Waynesburg just couldn't really get back from that. Both teams went back and forth, but to that point, Chatham went ahead of Waynesburg, and Waynesburg was kind of forced to foul, and Chatham made an opportunity at the free throw line, making all their free throws.
So moving on from Chatham, let's talk about the defeat to Allegheny. They lost 70-59 this past Saturday. Why don't you give a recap about that game?
So going into the Allegheny game, Waynesburg led by 9 points at the half, and then the Gators went to a 30-12 run in the second half. That is just not the outcome you want, in particular the last 10 minutes of the game. So that's kind of how Allegheny was able to, kind of just put their foot on the gas and get ahead of Waynesburg. But there was there's 10 second chance points from Allegheny on the offensive end. You just are not looking for that. On Waynesburg's side of things, Waynesburg did lead in the rebounding department, 42 rebounds to 30, 24 of them being on the offensive side of things. And we finally saw Jalen Davis kind of come into his own this season with 11 points and 12 rebounds in this one. So it was good to see him start to build some confidence as this season goes on, and kind of just not at a much needed time, but Waynesburg, as they're getting the President's Athletic Conference play, every game is hard in the PAC, and I think we're starting to learn that if you already haven't learned already. Corey Mitchum, I want to talk about him a little bit. He had a big impact in this game kind of on the offensive side of things. He had 10 points, which I believe is his career high this season, and 6 of those 10 points came in the second half with 2 crucial three-pointers to kind of get Waynesburg back in fighting distance, but it just wasn't enough.
So just improvement overall. You mentioned P.J. Suggs, how he's pretty much Waynesburg's leading scorer, he is Waynesburg's leading scorer, averages right around 15 points per game. Just describe kind of the development of P.J. Suggs' game from last year to this year, and while doing that, touch on what happened to Anton Baker, Defensive Player of the Year last year. Yeah, he still averages about a double-double, just hasn't been the factor down in the paint or on the scoring offensive side as a whole. So talk about Suggs' development and Anton Baker's struggles.
So when it comes to P.J. Suggs, he missed a lot of time last season due to injury. And honestly, it seemed like he used that almost to his advantage, staying in the gym and just staying ready for his opportunity. We mentioned it a couple times throughout the season. He looks a lot stronger this season, and it's showing with his athletic ability, finishing at the rim. P.J. Suggs is probably one of the best finishers in the PAC, and I think he's shown that this season. And then going on to Anton Baker, other than P.J. Suggs, no one's really been consistent in this Waynesburg offense. And I think just watching some of the early games, it didn't seem like Anton Baker was completely healthy. And it seems like that injury is still lingering. He shot 2 for 9 in the loss to Allegheny. So we need to start getting him going to get a better offensive production.
Does it seem like a confidence thing to you or mental state? Because I know players, when they get into their own heads, like, it's brain fog from there, not much good. Confidence, or what's the main problem?
It just seems like he hasn't had that kind of breakout games to this point in the season. And it seemed like last year, when he was averaging, around 20 points per game when we started getting the President's Athletic Conference play, that he just built off that game after game and was able to build confidence. So I think once he gets that breakout game, he'll start to see the Anton Baker we're still used to, but still averaging a double-double. So he's still making a big impact for this Waynesburg team.
Taking it from individual aspects to now more of a team overall thing, we've seen this team, they play well against more of the tougher teams in the PAC. They took down the reigning PAC champions Geneva earlier in the year. They have these close games, but then they go against teams that are about their level, if not worse than them on the standings, and they struggle to play them. What's been the issue there?
It might honestly be just taking opponents light. Like you mentioned, it seems like every time they kind of see that top matchup that they're in every game, it seems like, when it comes to those, kind of top-notch teams in the PAC. I know Geneva, you mentioned that win. That was at a much-needed time. They were winless to that point, and they were able to build some confidence off of that. But just overall, so far, going into Westminster, they have 9 days off. And Westminster, they're 0-4, kind of the bottom of the pack. Very curious on how Waynesburg's going to treat that, as they have until the end of finals to start preparing for that game. So pretty much the preparation they put in is completely up to them. As I talked to Coach Fusina, and they're really not preparing until after finals week.
Now, based on that preparation, when are they going to focus on offensive production? And because their defense can only help them so much. Mm-hmm. They're 5th in the PAC with defense, but offensively they've been struggling all year.
Yeah, it seems like, year after year we know that Coach Tim Fusina is a defensive-minded coach, but I think it's really the time to start addressing their offensive struggles. I mentioned a little bit ago, other than P.J. Suggs, really no one's consistent in this offense. I'd like to see a lot more consistency, especially from the three-point range. Jalen Goins, he's been a transfer who's had an immediate impact. He's a third leading scorer on this team. He had 10 points in the loss to Chatham, and I think just trying to get him more involved, as we saw what Waynesburg could do with kind of a three-headed monster last season with Jordan McLeod. So kind of just trying to find someone to fill that role.
Yeah, that's perfect that you mentioned Jordan McLeod. That was actually my next question I wanted to touch on. Corey Mitchell more of like a defensive sounded guard, and he runs Waynesburg's offense. How does having a defensive guard run an offense, how does that affect the play and chemistry as a whole? Because McLeod, it's a completely different, and I know I used the word already, dynamic of an offense when McLeod was your point guard with K1 as your 2 compared to K1 as your 1. So
you kind of mentioned it a little bit with how Corey Mitchum kind of brings an edge to the defensive side of things. But when it comes to Jordan McLeod, if you watch, his highlights from last season and just games overall, he strived in kind of the isolation ball, where Corey Mitchum, he gets guys more involved on the offensive game, especially with his assist numbers. He's great at passing the ball, and at times he can be clutch for this Waynesburg team. It seems like when Waynesburg needs him most is where he kind of strives. But kind of on the offensive end of things, it's a lot different actually than what we were used to with Jordan McLeod, as Mitchum's going to get other guys involved, where McLeod was more of a scorer.
Well, Benicio, I'd like to thank you for joining us on here for this final segment of the fall episode here on Jacket Sports Weekly. And with that final segment, this is also my final show here on WCTV. I'd like to thank Mia Hankins and Tyler Aaron, the co-producers of Jacket Sports Weekly. I'd like to thank Meg Berry, our fearless leader here of WCTV. I'd like to thank everybody here in the Department of Communications here at Waynesburg. It has been a fantastic ride. I couldn't imagine to spend it with any more better people in this university. I'm truly blessed, and I can't wait to see where my journey goes, and not just mine, but everybody here, especially at this desk with Dean Shazer, Benicio DeFalco, everybody behind those cameras. It's going to be a joy to see this. So again, thank you for tuning in to Jacket Sports Weekly. We hope you have a very happy holiday season.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.